Franz Josef Land is one of the northernmost archipelagos on Earth, lying about 870 kilometers from the North Pole in the high Arctic Ocean. It consists of 192 islands covering more than 16,000 square kilometers, with roughly 85% of the surface buried under ice. Today, it is part of Russia's Arkhangelsk Oblast and inhabited only by military and research personnel. In this video, we'll look at how these remote islands were first discovered, the early polar expeditions that followed, and why Franz Josef Land became a key point in the history of Arctic exploration. There are two groups that could be considered as the discoverers of Franz Josef Land. One of them is the crew of the Norwegian sealing vessel Spitsbergen, which sailed from Svalbard in 1865 in search of new sealing sites. The crew, led by Captain Niels Fredrik Ronbeck, found an archipelago that was likely Franz Josef Land, but they didn't announce their discovery to avoid competition from other vessels. They named the area Nordost Spitsbergen or Ronbeck Land. Around the same time, a Russian magazine published an article suggesting that there could be a landmass between Novaya Zemlya and Svalbard, based on current flows and ice conditions in the Barents Sea. However, a planned Russian expedition to explore the area was never funded. The discovery of Franz Josef Land was first publicly announced by the Austro-Hungarian North Pole Expedition, led by Julius and Karl Weyprecht in 1872-1874. They were on a mission to find the Northeast Passage and reach the North Pole, but their ship got stuck in ice near Novaya Zemlya. The crew drifted with the ice and eventually reached an unknown archipelago, which they named after the Emperor of Austria, Franz Josef I. The crew had to abandon their ship in May 1874 and were later rescued by a Russian fishing vessel, which brought them to Norway. By the late 19th century, Franz Josef Land had become one of the most important gateways for Arctic exploration. In 1880, Benjamin Leigh Smith led an expedition to Franz Josef Land, landing on Bell Island and setting up a base at Ira Harbor. He explored the area and returned the following year, but his ship, the Ira, sank in the ice. The crew built a cottage and stayed the winter and were eventually rescued by British vessels. These early expeditions focused on the southern and central parts of the archipelago. A few years later, in 1893, Norwegian explorer Fridtjof Nansen set out on an expedition to reach the North Pole. His ship, the Fram, drifted through the Arctic Ocean for a year and a half before Nansen and his companion Hjalmar Johansen set out on skis to reach the pole. However, they were unable to reach the pole and instead made their way to Franz Josef Land, where they were able to establish that there was no large landmass to the north. Around the same time, the Jackson-Harmsworth expedition was taking place, with a base set up on Bell Island. Nansen and his companions stumbled upon this expedition at Cape Flora in 1896 and were able to return to Norway with their help. The Jackson-Harmsworth expedition spent the winter on the island and explored the surrounding area the following season. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, several expeditions used Franz Josef Land as a base to try and reach the North Pole. One of the first attempts was made by American journalist Walter Wellman in 1898, but he was unsuccessful. The Italian nobleman Luigi Amedeo also led an expedition to the archipelago in 1899, but his attempts to reach the pole were also unsuccessful. The Ziegler Polar Expedition, led by Evelyn Baldwin, set up a base on Alger Island in 1901, but failed to make any significant progress towards the pole. The expedition was considered a failure, and a new expedition was organized the following year, led by Anthony Fiala. However, this expedition was also unsuccessful, and the crew was forced to stay an extra year before being evacuated in 1905. Russia soon followed with its own missions. The icebreaker Yermak reached the islands in 1901, and Georgy Sedov's expedition in 1912-1914 conducted the first snow and magnetic field measurements before Sedov died on a final push toward the pole. Following Sedov's death, the ship Hertha, commanded by Ishak Islyamov, was sent to search for the party. During the mission, Islyamov raised the Russian flag at Cape Flora, officially claiming Franz Josef Land amid the First World War concerns that enemy forces might occupy it. Around the same time, Polish aviator Jan Nagorski and the vessel Andromeda also searched for Sedov's group. Though they found no survivors, their flights and surveys confirmed that the supposed Petermann Land and King Oscar Land north of the Archipelago did not exist. From 1923 onward, the Soviet Union organized regular expeditions to Franz Josef Land, which it formally annexed in 1926, declaring all territory between the mainland and the North Pole as Soviet under the sector principle, a claim not internationally recognized and protested by Italy and Norway. In 1929, the Soviet icebreaker Sedov, led by Otto Schmidt, established a permanent base at Tikhaia Bay, marking the start of continuous Soviet presence. During the 1930s, extensive mapping, glaciological and geological work followed, with a population of up to 300 by 1937. During the Second World War, Germany set up a secret weather station on Alexandra Land, abandoned in 1944 after the men were struck by trichinosis from eating polar bear meat. The Cold War revived Soviet military activity, and the Nagoskoye base was built on the former German site. Scientific interest peaked again during the International Geophysical Year, 1957-1958, but the area remained closed to foreigners until the 1990s.